Okay, Kim, are we live? We'll find out in a minute if we're live. I think we're live. I hope we're live. We'll see. What? Oh, that was a promo, the intro. Just a promo. Well, wait a minute. Chaim, ladies. Chaim, I talked to my father about you today. My father called me because you called him. My father called me. Don't worry about it. You're good. You're good. You're good. Yeah, I know. He called me just now. Yes. Hello, ladies. Hello, Sada. Hello, Barbara. Yes. Do you see me yet? You see me? Oh, you see me. Let's get a comment. Marsha says hi. Okay, if Marsha says hi, we can start. Marsha says hi, we can start. I don't see anyone on Chabad.org. If someone on Chabad.org could say hi. 1 second. No printouts, no. We're not going to be doing a lot of text. Just one piece of Gemara, but okay. If you're watching me on Chabad.org, please comment so I can verify that people are watching us. Okay. What? On where? On our Facebook? Yeah, Shira's on, Karina's on, Andrew's on. Happy birthday, Andrew. Andrew's had a birthday. She turned like 25, right, Andrea? Okay, let's start. Chaim Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvaro. Nice learning, as always, is in the memory of Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yosef, is a Shema and elevation, and for Shlema from Masha Bas Chai who is watching us, and for everyone else, needs blessings and healings and good things, for all the Jews in Israel, for all the hostages, and the amazing soldiers of the IDF. Okay, Pesach is coming. Pesach is coming. That's what they say. Next week, this time, there won't be a class. I'll be teaching, but there won't be a class. It'll be live. It won't be a class. You'll be here. We won't be in this room. You'll be in the other room. But I'll be teaching, but it won't be a class. And they actually explained that at great length. The teaching of the Seder is not frontal teaching. Right now is a class. There's a frontal presentation. I have some, hopefully, words of wisdom I want to share. I'm getting distracted before I even started. It's crazy. So now we're learning. It's a form of, the Seder is not meant to be a frontal presentation of information. It's meant to be an experimental, hands-on learning, is remembered forever and ever, for not be described as teaching per se. It's teaching, but not in the formal format. Anyway, I got distracted before we even started. Okay, hello, Andrea. 16. Wow, 16. Just joking. Okay. Shavuot Tov Art. So let's begin with a joke. First tip for the Seder: have a few jokes in your up your sleeve. It helps. Here, Steve, a few jokes. Yeah. No, keep the sleeves down and have a few jokes inside them. You never know when you're gonna need a joke. You never know who's choking on the matzah, who's on the, no, you never know. Who got upset, who got okay. So you still see me on Facebook, right? Okay, yeah, still because the screen moved. So there's this guy comes for a job interview, and he tells the boss, he goes through the whole interview, tells the boss, you should know, I'm a very responsible person. So the guy doing the interview says, how do you know that you're so responsible? He says, every job I've ever been to, whenever things are going wrong and the boss is getting frustrated and angry, he always comes to me at a time of crisis and says, Fred, you're the one responsible for this. So let's talk about God's resume, if you will, right? When God, I wouldn't call it a job interview because God wasn't really getting interviewed by us. If anything, we were getting interviewed by him. But at that first meeting, when God introduces himself to the Jewish people formally, because till the whole story of the Exodus, God had only spoken through his booking agent, right? God had an agent, and the agent was doing all the negotiations, and Moses was going back and forth. Now, finally, after 49 days of preparation, the Jews are standing at Mount Sinai, and God is going to appear, in all of his glory, in all of his greatness. God is going to appear before the Jewish people. And how does God introduce himself? I mean, I didn't make a page with the text, but you all know the verse by heart anyway. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with the opening line of the Ten Commandments. God says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slaves. Right? That's the opening verse. Now, if you were God, and I asked this question this morning, if you were God and you wanted to really impress somebody, right? You want to really show someone, I'm the God that you want to trust. I'm the God you want to follow. I'm the God that you want to commit your life to. What would be a much, much more impressive way of beginning the 10 Commandments? Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am the Lord your God who created heavens and earth. What's more impressive? To create millions of galaxies and I don't know how many trillions of different species of flowers and birds and fish and life and sun and the moon and the stars and the hurricanes and the rainbows, or to take a people of slaves out of slavery. What's more impressive? Without a doubt, to make the universe is pretty cool. Most of us can't do that. I don't know how many of us have slaved from slavery, but it's not as we can get the concept. So, God's a little stronger than someone else, but being able to free someone, being able to help someone, people have saved other people's lives. The point is taking Jews that were slaves, and what did God do? He took us from slavery and took us somewhere else, took us to the desert. He didn't create something new. He didn't use all of his God powers to take us out of Egypt, but to make a universe from nothing and to make all the galaxies and all the worlds and all the stars and all the cosmos and all the minute beauty and variety and diversity and complexity of the universe in which we live, that's pretty cool. Requires a lot of God power to do that, right? So if you were God and you were introducing yourself to the Jewish people and trying to convince them to buy in and sign the dotted line and become the Jewish people and commit to keeping 613 commandments, most likely, how would you start? Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, Asher bara shamayim va'aretz, I created heavens and earth. Or, I am the Lord your God who created you, who gave you life this morning. The reason why you're alive is because I created you today. I gave you life. I helped you wake up. And instead, God begins with something which does not seem to be nearly as impressive on the resume by saying to the Jewish people, I am the one who took you out of Egypt. I'm the one who did the Exodus, who took you out of slavery. So obviously, there's something about the Exodus story that is so amazing, so impressive, so important for us to know, not so much impressive, but so important for us to recognize as we begin our journey as Jewish people, that God felt it's more important that we should be reminded of the Exodus. We should be reminded of creation of galaxies in 6 days. So the discussion tonight is, what is the message of the Exodus? That is the reason why God chooses the 10 Commandments with this. And also, when we understand that message, we'll have a lot more insight into our own state of mind as we enter into the holiday of Passover and we relive once again the Exodus experience. Because it goes without saying, and we say this every year, and we'll say it again next year and the year after, that the story of the Exodus is meant to be something that we're not discussing as a historical fact that happened 3,300 years ago. The Exodus is something that we are reliving each and every year. We say in the Haggadah, this is the text of the Haggadah, B'chol dar v'dar, in every generation, Chayav Adam Liras is Atzmai, a person is obligated to see himself. Ki'iluhu Yatzim Mitzrayim, as if he himself has left Egypt. Which means that I and you and every one of us need to come into the Pesach Seder with the mindset that we are experiencing our own Exodus. This story that happened then is also happening again now. This story that happened to the Jews is also happening to me, to us, to me. So let's understand, why is this story of the Exodus such an important story? Now, I have to tell you that there's many, many answers to this question. The question's a pretty good question, and many commentaries ask this question. Why would God not start the 10 Commandments with creation of the universe or creation of man? And in fact, one of the most distinguished commentators on the Torah is named Ibn Ezra, Avram Ibn Ezra. So he actually writes, and I looked it up today, he writes, there's 237 commentaries, something. On Safari, they have I literally think it was 237 commentaries on this verse. But anyway, we're not giving a class on the 10 Commandments. We're giving a class on the Exodus. We're framing it in this But so he explained that he actually says a story that he had a dinner, he had a meeting with Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, who was the author of the Kuzari, who was known to debate the very famous debate. And so Rabbi Yehuda Halevi told Ibn Ezra this question, asked this question, why does the Torah start with the Exodus? So he said to him, in fact, the Rambam, right, you start with creation, the beginning of all knowledge is to know that God created the world. So he said that God wanted to start with something personal that the Jews had actually experienced themselves. So when you talk about creation, how does a Jew know that God created the world? Either we believe it, right? It's tradition. When we were little kids in school, that's what our mommies taught us, or our daddies taught us, or our teacher in preschool taught us. And we've grown up our whole lives as believers, and so we believe that God created the universe. Or we're smart, and we're able to see within the cosmos. Actually, it's interesting. The Ibn Ezra, I was learning it today, he actually gives an example of the solar eclipse. I should actually have done the text. He actually writes that when you see and you study the orbit of the sun and the orbit of the moon, and how you can have a solar eclipse and you understand how the moon can cover the sun, you become clear, it becomes obvious to you that there must be a ruler and a creator who's putting the sun on its orbit, putting the moon on its orbit. And the fact that the moon and the sun, you can see that the moon is so much weaker than the sun, and yet the moon can cover the sun, is a clear proof to the thinking intellectual of the fact that obviously there's a God, an invisible God, an all-powerful God, who makes the sun and the moon go on their orbits. And so you see how the moon is not the moon. The moon is a tool being directed and being conducted by God. He brings a few examples, just very interesting. We just had a solar eclipse last week. And one of the examples the Ibn Ezra brings, how any thinking intellectual who studies the universe, who studies astronomy, who studies science, studies medicine, etc., will become aware of the hand of God in creation. Right? So the Ibn Ezra, it's a very interesting example. Why is this frozen? So that's the example that the Ibn Ezra. The point is, so if God would introduce himself to the Jews and say, I am God, Lord God, who created heavens and earth, either the Jews would have to believe, or they would have to start intellectualizing. Not all Jews are smart. Some Jews are, but some Jews are. I met a few Jews that are not so smart. Only a few. I met some very smart ones, and some that leave some to be desired. It wasn't a fair distribution of brains when God was creating man. It wasn't like equally distributed in a. It was not done exactly right. So the point is, so instead, God starts off with something that everyone can relate to. Every Jew that was standing outside, they had personally just experienced the Exodus 49 days before, and if they can relate to it, they can remember it, it was more meaningful. Okay, that's one very good answer. Another answer is that the Torah God wants to tell the Jewish people not something about the entire universe. God wants to tell the Jewish people why he's choosing them as his chosen people. So the fact that God created the heavens and the earth, that's not unique to the Jewish people. And the human being that's living on this planet has to appreciate and worship and respect the God who's creator of the universe. God is specifically telling the Jewish people something which is unique and specific to the Jewish people. Okay, another very good answer to explain it. But of course, we have a much, much deeper perspective we want to discuss tonight according to Chassidus. So, especially because there's other miracles that happen too. You have the Exodus, you have the plagues, you have the splitting of the sea, you have the bread coming down from heaven. So according to Ibn Ezra's answer, if you wanted to say a miracle that's very relevant to the Jews that they can relate to and they can remember, what's a miracle that they could really relate to? That morning, how did the Jews eat breakfast? Man came down from heaven. And last night, what did they drink? Water from the well of Miriam. So it wasn't only miracles that happened 49 days earlier. The miracles happening every day. And yet, of all the miracles, it's the Exodus miracle. So, I'll give an answer from the Rebbe, an answer Chassidus from a letter of the Rebbe, 1945, by way of introduction. What is harder to do? To build the building from scratch? Or to take an existing, dilapidated, empty commercial warehouse and turn it into something magnificent? The latter. Steve enjoys these kind of projects. Steve is handy. And I will agree 100% with Steve. To build a building from scratch, I mean, obviously it's a little more expensive, but you can build whatever you want. The only limitation is your imagination and your budget. As long as you have money, you can build a skyscraper. You can build whatever you want. And the city, that's true. And zoning requirements and code requirements and parking requirements and color requirements. Fire department in Coral Springs, your paint colors and the shape of the roof and the letter. It's all code here is through the roof. Yeah, you can't put. I remember when we designed. I remember Don Morris, whatever. He should be healthy. So he designed originally. There's like round arches around the mirror, around the windows. He designed it originally. There was a round arch, and the small window, which is flat, was a triangular. Was a triangle. It's like to be more unique. And went to the zoning, and they rejected. They wouldn't accept. We had a zoning meeting. You have to go before planning and zoning, and these people on the board. They said it looks disgusting. Who makes round arches and triangles? And he got very offended. I was like, "Oh no, this is not going to end well." He was screaming. So what are you talking about? The White House has round and triangle. They said, "No, it doesn't." And he went to does, by the way. The White House has round and triangles, but the city of Coral Springs zoning board decided you can't have that, even though the White House has it. He was very offended. But we don't have it because zoning didn't approve it. So yes, there's a lot of restrictions. Anyway, what? Coral Springs. But it's still a beautiful city. I'm still glad that God put us here. I'm not sure why I'm glad, but Jews should be happy wherever you are. You're happy with. We're happy. Listen, we can live in. I was going to say some cities having protests now. You can be living by the Golden Gate. You can live in Chicago, O'Hare. I spent 4 years in Chicago. You can live in there and not be able to get to the airport. Whatever. Anyway, here's the story, my friends. So when you get an existing building, like this building, it was a Blockbuster. Now, to turn Blockbuster into a beautiful, magnificent show is very challenging because the building's already existing. It's already pre-built. And you can't really change the height of your roof. So if you want to make the ceiling higher than the 10 feet that it was before, you got to redo all the ductwork to go into the trusses and figure out a way to make the ducts go into the trusses. And when your contractor says it can't work, but you've seen it been done before, and you have to convince him it could be done, when he's a contractor and you're the rabbi, it's stressful. I mean, obviously, I eventually convinced him and he did it. But it's not easy to transform one thing into something else. So, what is the miracle of creation? When God made the universe, what did God do? God made something out of nothing. Was there any limitation on how God should make the world? No. God could have made the world any way he possibly could have wanted. He could have made trees grow upside down. He could have made trees grow sideways. He could have made people fat. He could have made people, I don't know, like octopuses with 8 arms. I don't know. He could have done anything. Why God made the world the way he did is because God obviously had a plan and everything was for a reason. But God made it the way he did. But God could have made anything. There was no limitation. There was no preconceived existence or preconceived form that God had. So however he made it, that's how it was meant to be. What's the miracle of the Exodus? To take something that already exists, something physical, and to show that the rules of nature are not a limitation to God. The Jews were enslaved in a nation that seemingly, naturally, would never allow slaves to escape. Do you know that it says that in all of Egyptian history, no slave ever escaped? They had a whole system of dogs guarding the border. They didn't have a wall back then. They had dogs. And no person could escape. You tried escaping, the dogs would attack, they would bark, they would kill the person. When the Jews left Egypt, the Torah says, that the dogs didn't bark. Dogs are rewarded. In fact, I'm getting distracted, but the Torah says that you should feed the meat of a non-kosher animal to the dog, even though you can sell it, you can make money out of it, you can do anything you want with it. It's not for eat it. But the Torah specifically says give it to the dog as a reward to the dogs that didn't bark at the Jews when they I'm reminded of a joke. Should I say a joke? It's a Torah joke. It's a Torah joke, but it's a good joke. It's a very profound joke. There's some beautiful Torah jokes. So the dogs that didn't bark were given a reward. The Torah says later on to give the meat of non-kosher animals as a reward. They didn't bark, didn't open their mouth. What about the frogs? The 10 plagues, the frogs had tremendous sacrifices. Frogs, which are cold-blooded creatures, jumped into the ovens. They jumped into their stomachs. So as the Egyptian was eating, they jumped into their mouth, and there were frogs living inside the stomachs of the Egyptians as they're trying to sleep. And ribbit, right in their stomachs. They hear, and the frogs are not rewarded for their sacrifice in this. They jumped into the ovens, sacrifice, Mesiras Nefesh. So why are the frogs willing to give up their lives and jump into the oven? They don't get rewarded. The dogs just didn't bark. They didn't do anything. They didn't do anything. For that to get rewarded. So what's the answer? Sometimes to keep your mouth shut is harder than to jump into the oven. It's a profound wisdom of the Torah there. For someone to keep their mouth shut, they get rewarded. That's much harder than just sacrificing your life. We'll die as long as I can scream and shout at you all. Anyway, so back to what we were saying. What's the story? What's the miracle of the Exodus? The miracle of the Exodus is that God took a physical empire, an empire that was the most powerful superpower of the time, that had never allowed a slave to ever escape. And God didn't just make one slave escape. God made a nation of 2-3 million people walk out in broad daylight. So God changed the rules of nature. He took something out of something else. He took a nation out of, these are the words of the Torah. God took a nation from a nation. And he made a new nation. So for God to create something from nothing, to make a universe, to create brand new cosmos and galaxies on this clean, empty space, for God it's pretty easy. But for God to, now God can do anything, but from our perspective, when God takes an existing physical reality that seems to our eyes to be unbreakable, it seems to be impossible to change, it seems to be like the superpower of the universe, and God breaks that superpower, and God takes us out from within this place which we thought we would never escape from. That is a much greater miracle. And why is it a greater miracle? Why do we need to know that? Because when God comes to us at Mount Sinai, what God needs us to know is not that God could create a world. Okay, good for you, God. You can create a world. All that creation proves is that God can create. And the Jews believe that God can create a world. We don't doubt that. But the Exodus proves that the boundaries that God set within creation don't have the final word, and God always remains in charge. We lost connection again. You hear that? That is a very, very powerful message. Second. I touched the computer and the thing got unplugged. There we go. Okay. That is what God wanted. That's what God wanted to tell the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. Don't think I'm just a God that can create the world. That's easy. I am a God that even in the boundaries that I've created within nature, those boundaries are not final, and I remain in charge. Now, what does that mean for us human beings? As a human being, what is God really saying to us? Not in abstract words of God, but to us. What's easier? To live a good life when you've always lived a good moral, ethical life, and you grew up religious and you grew up in a good home? Or when you didn't grow up with it, when you grew up not being ethical or not being kind and not being loving and not being generous, and now you change yourself. And now you say the prefab default settings that I had before, the rules that were ruling my life till now, are not final, and I can change them. What's a greater moment? To always be good is easy, relatively speaking. And nothing is always easy, but relatively speaking, if you start off with a young kid and you raise them the right way and you only give them good things and you don't let them see all the garbage in the world, and it's you have a much better chance. But once you're stuck in the system habits, once you've already made and developed bad traits, now to break the mold, to with the mold, that's much more difficult. That's much more difficult. And this is what God is saying at the moment of the Ten Commandments. He's saying to the Jewish people, I know who you are. I know that you're a nation of you for a long time, and you're carrying all these insecurities, no blemishes, and you should know that the fact that you have what you think are the limitations in your own mind You think you have your own limitations because you didn't grow up this way. But you were slaves in Egypt. You weren't raised to be religious and Egyptian taskmaster. But the fact that you have back all this trauma from your slavery, that's not the end of the story. You're not limited to what because Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God, who can break the previous rules. I am Hashem your God, who can take you out of your previous mistakes and out of your previous trauma, and out of your previous limitations and your previous slavery. That's much more powerful. There was this Jew, very, very religious Jew. He's also very wealthy. He built himself a new house. Big. He built his new dream house. He sent in life house. A spa. That's not. Yeah. Okay. A Pesach kitchen. Another kid, a Pesach kitchen. You have a kitchen dedicated just for Pesach, so you don't have to start cleaning and kashering your kitchen and taking all the dishes out and bringing the stuff from the garage in. You have a Pesach kitchen and the cat there, and you're already salivating, just imagining what a Pesach kitchen would feel like. You lock the door after Pesach. When I was a kid, we had one. That's it. And then it comes time for Pesach. Whenever you're ready to cook, you just unlock the door. King, you don't need to clean anything. You don't need to. Amazing. This guy was so religious. He didn't only make a Pesach kitchen. He also made a Pesach dining room. He made a whole wing to his house. He added another room, and he said, "Come Pesach, we're going to eat in the room where there's no chametz all year." I guess he didn't have such a big family. I don't know. He had a room. He made a whole room. They probably kitchens were like part of your dining room. Like you had a whole kitchen, like with like 5 different, walk-in closets and pantries and ovens. Kitchens were a little smaller then, just a little bit. So he built himself a Pesach room in the house, a whole Pesach, like kitchen dining room, and that's what they can eat on Pesach. His rabbi comes to visit, giving him a tour of the house with all the upgrades in the house. And it's just the AC system. I don't know whatever they have. There's pride in the rabbi's going to be very impressed. He has not just a Pesach kitchen, a whole Pesach room with a dining room, everything. And the rabbi's not so impressed. So he's not impressed. Pesach kitchens are going back, I don't know, 100, 200 years ago, like a Pesach kitchen. You can't have chametz. Chametz will never enter this room ever. It's the most religious way of keeping Pesach. You'll never have a chance of chametz getting here. So the rabbi says, my father was very religious and my rebbe was very religious. They never had a Pesach kitchen. You know why? Because what's a more beautiful kitchen? A kitchen that was always kosher for Pesach, or a kitchen that had chametz in it and was used all year for chametz. And now you scrub and you clean and you worked and you transformed the kitchen from being a chametz space into a cleansed Pesach space. That's how you celebrate Pesach. Understand? To walk into a kitchen that was locked all year, say, okay, it's Pesach, start cooking. You're missing half of the Pesach experience. Half of what makes Pesach half the fun. Half of what makes Pesach you as a kid is the cleaning. Kids all cleaning Sunday. I'll for a second. True. The work is part of the hardest holiday to do. Pesach, without a doubt, was the hardest holiday. Second hardest holiday, Yom Kippur. Exactly. No eating, no nothing, sitting in shul all day. Not all rabbis know how to tell jokes. Some of them are pretty bad at it, right? And you got to still listen to the guy. And Yom Kippur is pretty tough. So Yom Pesach is the hardest holiday. Pesach is the second hardest. What's the easiest Jewish holiday? Purim is pretty easy. Yeah, just have to give out some hamatat, say Sefer L'chaim. Even easier than that, Shavuos. Well, and ice cream. You don't got to clean cook. No brisket, no nothing. It's cheesecake and maybe if you really fancy, make blintzes. If you want to really work hard, you make blintzes. And yet, what's the most widely celebrated holiday of all the Jewish holidays? Pesach. What's the second most celebrated holiday? Yom Kippur. What's the least celebrated holiday? Shavuos. How does that make any sense? The holiday that's easy and that's fun. All you got to do is show up and eat ice cream. Nobody shows up. We're marketing, we're screaming, free ice cream, come, cones, sundaes, dishes, and sprinkles, and make your own ice cream sundae. Get a crowd. Pay, come, schwitz, clean, scrub, work. I'll serve you some matzah and maror, and the house is full. How does that make sense? The work is what makes it memorable. The reason why as a kid you grew up with this memories of Pesach is because it was an experience of transformation, of seeing for Pesach, and that is a part of the experience. That's a part of the experience. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Yitzchak Berditchev, he says, beautiful word, on Rosh Hashanah, in the prayer book, I was going to say, if you look in the prayer book, so after we blow the shofar from Rosh Hashanah, there's like names of angels. We say, Kashrak, Kuf, Shin, Reish, Kufim, Tkiya, Shmarim, Trua, Tkiya, Kashrak. So he said, Yitzchak Berditchev said, that if the Jews are not able to affect atonement by God and forgiveness by God with the kashrak, with the kuf, shin, reish, kuf of the mystical thoughts that we're meant to think about after the blowing of the shofar, instead, the kuf, shin, reish, kuf, the kasherin, and the shvakin, the soaking, and the raibin, which is the scrubbing, and the kratzit, the cleaning of the kitchen before Pesach, that will be their atonement. I'll give this word. Understand? The point is that it's not impressive to have a perfectly clean kitchen that's not touched all year. The beauty of Pesach, the satisfaction you get when you walk into your kosher for Pesach kitchen is the work of transformation. It's a transformative effort that makes this something that becomes memorable to the children. That's what it is. And therefore, when God takes the Jewish people to Mount Sinai, and he wants them not to feel limited by whatever limitations we think we have, by whatever we think we grew up with, or whatever character we're stuck. This is who I am. In America, we're very into saying, this is me, you got to respect who I am, and this is my personality. Take it or leave it. The Exodus is God's way of telling us that as a Jew, you're not limited to the rules of nature. I can take you out of slavery. I can take you out of whatever smallness. The word Mitzrayim is a netzar, the narrow place. Whatever narrowness, whatever feelings of limitation that you feel that you can't do something, I could take you out. You feel that you can't do this, I could take you out. You feel you can't do this, you can't give this charity, you can't whatever, can't go to shul. It's not the way I grew up. It's not me. It's not. I don't feel natural. Going out of Egypt means you're not limited to who you were before. The fact that you were that way yesterday or last year or 10 years ago, God could take you out of that. We're not stuck in stone. That's a very, very important idea. I'll tell you another story, similar idea about Pesach. I'm going to go to a beautiful Gemara. There was a chassid, the Lubavitcher, his name was Avram Elia Plotkin. His grandfather, many Plotkins, and great-grandfather. So he was a student in the yeshiva in Tomchei Tmim, Lubavitch, an original Chabad yeshiva, going back, I don't know, 100 years. Now, that was not yet Rebbe. He was the son of the fifth Chabad Rebbe, and he was the principal of the yeshiva. Okay? I don't know, once a quarter, after a report card, I'm not sure how often he would come into his father, the Rebbe Shabbat was the Rebbe, and give like a update on all of the yeshiva students in the yeshiva, how they were doing, how they were learning, and their character, and their midot, and their behavior. His father, the Rebbe Shabbat, and Rav Elia Plotkin is a very smart guy. He's learning, he's doing well, but he's not of a refined character. He's in Yiddish called grub. Grub means that he's very coarse. He's very, some people are like, he's lacking in the character of a Hasidic Jew. So the Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe to make sure he works very, very hard. So before Pesach, he should really work hard that Pesach. And so the previous Rebbe told this yeshiva student, Avram Elia Plotkin, he was in charge of the entire matzah baking operation in yeshiva. Back then, they didn't go home for Pesach like now. School's closed a week and a half before Pesach. Already everything's closed. Teachers need to prepare. The kids are home 2 weeks before. They're already off of school. They threw the and they had to make their own food. And he was being in charge of the entire operation, to eat and to guard it and to prepare the grind, the mill, and to watch it and to see it. It was an extremely difficult job all by himself. Then the Frierdiker Rebbe told him he had to be in charge of the kosher in the kitchen as well. The kitchen where they would eat had to be kosher. The previous Rebbe was, and the principal gave him a number of jobs. He was up all day and night. Then the previous Rebbe told him that on the first Seder, he should say a mimer of the Alter Rebbe, a lengthy discourse. He should learn it by heart, to be able to say the whole thing by heart. And the next day, he wanted to test him on a different mimer by heart. Anyway, he went through that. He worked really hard. He was up all night the night before because all day was doing the matzah, and he had to kosher the kitchen all night. And the next day was again the final day before Pesach. And the Seder couldn't. The last day of Pesach, the Mashiach Seudah, the feast at the end of Mashiach Pesach, the Rebbe Rashab ate with the yeshiva students, and he said to his son, "Look at how edel his face became." About this, Avraham Elia Plotkin, the hard work called the Zayah Shel Mitzvah, the sweat of a mitzvah, the sweat of the mitzvah, all that sweat, all that effort, all that toil, koshering the kitchen and working in the matzah bakery and running the whole operation. I can see how his face has become more refined. Understand? What's the idea over here? The idea is a very simple idea. It is very easy and very tempting to become defined of self-created limitation. And there's a lot of safety and a lot of comfort in our limitations because we know where we are. Yeah, it's a limitation, but at least I know my place. And knowing my place is a very secure feeling. And I'm perfectly happy staying in my place, in my limitations. I'm not as good as you. I'm not as religious as you. I'm not as generous as you, but that's fine. I'm in my place, and I'm happy being where I am. Comes along the story of the Exodus. As I said, in every generation, a person needs to see himself as if we are leaving Mitzrayim ourselves. And we have to know that we all carry baggage. We all have those weaknesses or those character flaws or those mistakes we've made or those sins we've done that have begun to define us. The same way the Jews defined themselves as slaves. The Jews didn't see themselves as free people. The Jews in Egypt saw themselves as slaves, which is why many of them could never leave Egypt. And even those that left would quickly revert back to their mentality. They would quickly lose faith and lose hope because they had this mentality of slavery. It was ingrained into their very self-identity. They were so beaten and so humiliated and so that's what I'm looking for, mentally and emotionally oppressed by the Egyptians that they saw themselves as slaves. So much so that when Moshe comes to Pharaoh to let them people go, and Pharaoh says they should work harder, who do they blame for the fact that Pharaoh stopped giving them straw? Not Pharaoh, they blame Moshe. That's a slave mentality. And I've talked to other classes about this. They were themselves, they defined themselves as slaves. This we define ourselves by whatever limitation we've put upon ourselves because of our upbringing, because of our parents, because of our teachers, because of our friends, because of our personality, whatever the reason is. I think this is who I am, and I'm stuck in this box. Comes the night of the Exodus to tell us God is not just creator of heavens and earth. God doesn't only have the ability to build brand new buildings. God can take an old, ugly-looking blockbuster and he can make it into a beautiful shul as well. God can take an ugly-looking person, meaning a person with all of his baggage and all of his trauma and all of his, skeletons from his previous life as a slave in Egypt, and make that person to the chosen people as well. Got it? Okay. That's the story of the soul and the Jew. So now let me tell you a story in the Gemara. So this Gemara in Avodah Zarah, page 18, and it's a long whatever. So it's during the time of the Roman torturing of the Jewish people. And one of the 10 martyrs, if you know the familiar story of the 10 martyrs, was Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan. Remember that name? Heard the name? Chanina ben Trajan was one of the 10 martyrs who had a tongue that spoke whatever. And sure enough, when they would kill him, They wrapped his body in wool, and the Torah scroll, and they made it wet. They lit his body on fire, and he was burnt up with the letters of the Torah. A horrific way that they tortured him. So he went to go visit his teacher, who was Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. And his teacher, Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma, who was already very old, said to him, do you not know that this nation, the Jews, have been given over by heaven to the hands of the Romans, and they have destroyed the temple, and they burnt Hashem's sanctuary, and they've destroyed his best ones, meaning Rome has been given authority over us. And yet I hear about you that you stand in public, and you publicly teach Torah, and you're not afraid that the Romans will do to you. Don't you know against the Romans, God gave the Romans authority, and they'll kill you, they'll torture you, which is exactly what happened, that they'll burn both you and the Torah by fire, which is exactly what happened. He was wrapped in the Torah scroll, burnt with wet wool. They put wool on top of him to prolong the agony and the suffering of the being burnt alive. So listen to this. Bechanina ben Chadin asks his teacher, tell me, am I destined to go to the world to come or not? If you tell me that I'm going to go to Olam, to the world to come, when I die, I'm not scared. I'm not afraid to die. Teaching Torah in public, and if the Romans want to kill me, they'll kill me. I have nothing to be afraid of. So Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma, the teacher, asks his student, tell me what special thing did you do that maybe you'll be deserving of Olam Haba? What good deed did you do in your life? Rabbi Yechanida told his teacher that besides being a big scholar, fear of the Romans, he also collected money to give to charity to poor people. That's one of the things he did. He was a rabbi who would collect money for people that were in need, and he used to collect and distribute money for the poor. One part, he says, he had collected a lot of money, and he had money in the pocket. He had a few l'chaims too many. He mixed the monies together, and his money got mixed with the tzedakah. So even though I could have separated and figured out how was, he decided all charity and all of his money. And when Yossi ben Kisma heard that his student had given all of his money to charity, so he said, in that case, Olam Haba, you have nothing to be afraid of. When you die, you go straight to heaven. In fact, he said, my portion will be like your portion. The Alter asks a question: why only from the giving of charity does he merit the world come? The fact that he was risking his life in public, willing to be killed by the Romans, is not worthy of getting Olam Haba? Only because the person was his, and he gave it to charity. I merits the world to come. Alter explained that what matters is not how much you do or how much you give. What matters is how much you go out of your own comfort zone. How much you go beyond what you would have naturally done to transform yourself to do something more than you would have chosen to do naturally. At that moment, when Rabbi Chanina ben Chadin realized that all of his money, he wasn't a rich person, and money was important to him. It wasn't like, he needed it. He had his own bills to pay. And yet, at that moment, when he realized that he was being pushed to do something beyond his comfort zone, he said, I'm going to go do it anyway. At that moment is when he earned a portion of the world to come. He was willing to go one step out of the comfort zone, one step beyond what was his original, natural state of being, to become something new. And that, despite all the other mitzvahs, giving charity, collecting money, all the years he collected money for poor people, and all the years he taught Torah and studied Torah and was a righteous person, what earned him the world to come was being able to go beyond his natural comfort zone. And in fact, that brings a very famous Tanya, the famous taxi drivers, donkey drivers. The donkey drivers charge zuz for 10 miles. The moment you go 11 miles, the price doubles to 2 zuz. Why does it double? 1 mile, 10 miles is this price. So if I go 11 miles, 10% more, 15% more. Because once you go out of the natural, what's considered a standard fare, a standard journey, what's a standard trip, the price automatically doubles. The moment we're able to go out of whatever we consider our natural default setting, of Exodus. That's the moment of Exodus. So come to Pesach. Pesach has two parts to the story. One part is we were slaves. And then the second part is we were free. I want to say one thing, right? We were slaves and then we were free. We don't deny the fact that we were slaves. We don't just talk about our freedom. We talk about the slavery. We acknowledge slavery. We're not pretending it doesn't exist. And yet, we're not limiting ourselves to the slavery either. So we know our flaws, we know our baggage, we know our history, and yet we're able to transcend it. Same miracle of the splitting of the sea. Look at the whole of this idea. I wasn't going to go through the whole Dayenu. I was thinking about it today. In Dayenu, what do we say in Dayenu? In Dayenu, we say, what's the whole story of Dayenu? Ilu hotzianu mimitzrayim. If God would have just taken us out of Egypt, but not got judgments against the Egyptians, we don't need them to be destroyed. Taken us, destroyed them, but not punished their gods. God said it's not enough. God said it's not only enough for me to take you out of Egypt. I have to punish the Egyptians. And not just punish the Egyptians, I need to kill their gods. And not just kill their gods, I also need to, what's the next one who remembers? Kill their firstborns. And what's after kill their firstborns? I need to give you their money. Right? Not only you would kill every one of these are transformation, physical matter or a physical reality to a new reality. Think about it. If the whole purpose of the Exodus was just to take us out of Egypt, you know what God could have done? Let me say this question again. If the whole purpose of the Exodus was for God to take us out of Egypt, you know what God could have done? Just taken us out of Egypt. Instead, God goes through 10 months of this whole match with Pharaoh. And God has to kind of prove himself. And so Pharaoh says, I don't believe in this God. Oh, yeah? I'll show you. I'll do blood. Oh, I can also do blood. Okay, fine. I'll do frogs. Oh, I can also. Okay, fine. I'll do lice. You can't do lice. Okay, I'm not convinced. Okay, I'll do wild animals. I can't do that either. Okay, I'm going to do a new one. Boils. Now the magicians can't even stand before Pharaoh because they're in so much pain. And when Moshe threw up the earth, he did because he threw it in the air. He put 4 handfuls into 1 handful, but then the earth covered the whole land. So it looked like a magic trick, but it wasn't magic. So now they couldn't even stand before him, so they were so embarrassed. Each one more and more and more. Why did God need to do 10 plagues? Why did God need to do 10 plagues? If God wanted to take us out of Egypt, you know what God could have done? Just take us out of Egypt. He could have built some beautiful bridge. He could have made the dog shut up 10 months earlier and tell Moshe just walk out, and we would have walked out. And the same miracle that happened after 10 months, if the dogs didn't bark, would have happened 10 months earlier. What was the point of the Pharaoh to agree to let the Jews go? In fact, God even told Moshe at the very beginning, the plagues are not going to make Pharaoh give in. At the beginning, God knew, and Moshe knew, that the plagues are not even going to work. I mean, they'll work. The frogs will come and they'll croak and they'll make everyone miserable, but they're not Jews. So what's the why do we need 10 plagues to punish them? What's the point? The point is that the Exodus is not just that we should leave slavery. It's that Egypt should become transformed and that Egypt should acknowledge and recognize the power of God. Each one of the plagues was another step in destroying another one of the gods of Egypt. There's a whole, I would say, 2 classes on the 10 plagues. Each god that was started with the blood, which was the Nile River, which was their main god, and then each plague was another god that was destroyed to show their weakness, to show how they couldn't stand before God, how God could make the plague end what he said and start when he said. And then God says, not enough. Don't say Dayenu. Don't say it's enough for me to just bring 10 plagues, make my points. I have to destroy their God. Who made those gods? Our God. And those gods of nature, those gods that seem to be so powerful and so strong and so amazing, guess what? I'm going to destroy them. I'm going to transform them. And you're going to realize that what you thought was a God is not a God. And then the Egyptians, the firstborns. What did the firstborns represent? The powerful, the leaders. In those days, the firstborns were considered like, the most important person in the family. Egyptian, well, before they died, you know what the Egyptian firstborns did? They led a civil war against Pharaoh. Did you know that? On the 10th day of Nisan, which was the Shabbos before the Exodus, when the Egyptians saw the Jews preparing their animals or sheep for the Pesach lamb, for the Pesach offering, the Egyptians said to the Jews, "What are you doing with our gods?" Because the sheep were gods in Egypt. And the Jews told their Egyptian buddies and their Egyptian neighbors, "Oh, we're going to slaughter your God. We're going to put the blood on our doorposts. On the 15th, we're going out of Egypt. When God kills all the firstborns, we're going out of Egypt." God had said that ready to Pharaoh on the first day of the month. Sorry, he said it to him last month by the plague of darkness. And the Jews told the Egyptian firstborns, the next plague is not the wild animals, and it's not pestilent, it's you guys. And the Egyptian firstborns already knew that God is God. They'd already got times before. As the Egyptians demanding that Pharaoh let the Jews go free. And what did Pharaoh do? He sent an army to go and quash the revolution. And there was a civil war in Egypt where the Egyptian firstborn were fighting against the Egyptian army, fighting for the Jews to be released. And so we say in Dayenu that it's not enough that you punish the Egyptians. It's not enough that you even punish their gods. You even kill the firstborns. And you prove that the people that we thought were the mighty, important, powerful people, the elite of Egyptian society, they're not. They're fighting for the Jews, and they died. And then God gave us their money. Each one again and again is the idea of the true miracle of the Exodus, not that God can create something from nothing, but God can take something which looks like the power of Egypt and give it to the Jews. And by the way, you see that exact same idea again in the splitting of the sea. If you look further in the Dayenu, we talk about God didn't just split the sea, he killed the Egyptian, he sunk the army. And then we say in the Dayenu, if you would have taken us across the sea without turning the water or the mud into dry land, Dayenu, right? But God didn't just take us through the sea, Ilu Haviran, he took us the Tocho inside it, Becharav, and dry land. And in the Az Yashua, we say that God transformed the water, the bed of the ocean, to dry land. Meaning not just that God did a miracle and split the sea, not just that God helped us go through the sea and made us, escape from our enemies that were trying to kill us. But God also did another miracle and made the land dry. So when you walk through, it was easy to walk through, like a paved road instead of being muddy. Who wants to get their brand new shoes before the Seder? You get your shoes dirty. So we didn't get our shoes dirty. There was no mud. It was dry land. Why was that miracle necessary? The true miracle of the splitting of the sea is not that God stopped the water. The true miracle is that God can make the muddy bed of the sea become dry. Because to stop the water, what does God need to do? Just override nature. Just stop the sea from flowing. Had the water been transformed? No, it was just stopped. There's a wind blowing, an eastern wind blowing all night that stopped the water from going, and the water was being held up by this force of this eastern wind, and God said the water shouldn't flow. The moment the wind went away, the water resumed. But to take muddy water on the muddy dirt on the bottom of the ocean, which is muddy, it's wet, and to transform the wet, dirty mud into dry land, that is expressive of the power of God. To transform. And that's what we need to remember as we go into Pesach. The greatest miracle is not the miracle that if God would have made me somebody else, then I would be a good person. If God would have given me more money, then I'd be more generous. If God would have given me more brains, then I'd be more focused, then I would pray more. But God made me ADHD, so what is it? It's not my fault that I'm, No. The whole story of the Exodus is that God made you with whatever numbers and initials you have after your name. and with all those diagnoses and all those liabilities and all those issues and all those problems that you think that you have. And then God says, guess what? Those limitations of nature, those initials after your name, those things that your teacher said about you when you were a kid in school, those things that you told yourself about yourself, which is why you can't do what you know you need to do, those are only obstacles that you can change. I am the God, your God, who took you out of slavery, who has the power not just to create from new, but has the power to transform something ugly into something beautiful, something small into something big, something that's enslaved into something free and magnificent and gorgeous. And that is the Pesach story. Okay, my friends, good night. We should live it up very, very soon. As I said, next week and the week after is no class. Next week is the Seder. The week after is the night of Achron Shal Pesach. But Bezrat Hashem, you should all have, we say, a kosher and a freilich in Pesach. A kosher, enjoyable, a beautiful Aziz in Pesach, a sweet Pesach. And I'll see all of you over Pesach. But all of you guys, you guys online, we'll see you afterwards. Bezrat Hashem. Thank you, Art. Thank you, Faith. I'm glad you enjoyed. Amen. Andrea, thank you. I hope you enjoyed. Amen. Hello, Shani. You enjoyed. And everyone watching online, achabad.org, including those at the, If you don't believe in what we're talking about, you can find other websites and Facebook channels you can look at. Okay. Let me exit this. We'll delete some comments. Okay, we're back. Okay, anyway, Laila Tov, my friends. Good night. God bless you all. And next week we say they have a beautiful, wonderful Alice waiting for redemption in Maryland, waiting for all of us to wait for redemption. God willing, very, very soon. Zat Hashem. Good night, Shira. A beautiful Pesach to you. Enjoy, healthy, happy. Karine, to you as well. Marsha, thank you. You should be healthy. Blessings, good things. Laila Tov.